Welcome back to The Short Game. This is a show about short video games, games that respect your time. I'm Reagan Kelly, and I'm joined by awesome co-host this week, Laura Nash. How are you doing, Laura?
I am so happy that we played this video game.
Me too. It is so sweet. And Shane, my bro host, how are you doing, Shane?
I am doing great, thank you.
And this week, we are playing, or talking about having played Wandersong. If you aren't familiar, but if you're on Twitter, you've probably seen GIFs of this game. I've seen GIFs of this game being passed around on Twitter for like 3 years now, like since the Kickstarter 3 years ago. People have been passing GIFs of this very adorable little, almost paper cutout looking bard in a cute little bard hat and a little cute bard vest, doing cute little bard songs and gesturing with his cute little arms. And I mean, I've been seeing those for a long time now, even before I knew what the game was. And I mean, it was a bit of a surprise to see that this game had actually finally come out. It seems like one of those games that's sort of been just past the horizon for a really long time. But it came out about a week ago as of this recording, and we've all played at least some of it. And we're here to talk about it. It's pretty darn cute.
Yeah, this was a game that I had been watching for a long time. I had signed up for the email notification list. I didn't get to the Kickstarter, but when it came out, I downloaded it day of. It was the right game for me at the right time. I was pretty down. There was a lot of noise and sadness in my life, and the little bard in his Robin Hood outfit really made my week.
Yeah, and this game was a huge surprise for me. I mean, we'll talk about the story and all of the stuff about it, but I was not expecting to like this game as much as I did. I found myself really falling in love with the characters. It's a right game at the right time is a really good way to put it, because it was an incredible breath of sort of fresh air and sweetness without being cloying or
cheesy.
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't cheesy. It wasn't cloying. It was just a really good story. Much more interesting story to it than I expected. And it was really well told, and it was very sweet, very nice.
I think a lot of times things that are heartwarming are not nuanced, and I thought this was going to be a silly pastel pink, frothy escape thing, and it was actually a little deeper than that. It reminds me of some of the Night in the Woods, Undertale things that they've got a sweetness, but they got a little bit of a bite to it. That's not saying that this game isn't kid-friendly or family-unfriendly. It's actually really accessible. I think it's just got a lot more to it than you might get from the first 5 minutes.
Yeah, so if you saw the trailer for this and it didn't appeal to you, hang in there for a minute, because there's some stuff to this that's not immediately apparent on the tin, if that makes sense.
When I first heard the pitch on this game, and when I first started playing it, I had this huge misconception that almost put me off. I thought I was actually going to have to sing to do things in this game, like myself into a microphone. I think the game was described to me as like, oh, it's an RPG, but all the stuff that you do by singing. And I was like, oh, like a
rock band
game. Yeah, so it was described as like a music game, and so I was like, oh, okay, I guess I'm gonna have to have my microphone hooked up, and I hope it's easy. And luckily it was easy. It was even easier than that.
Yeah, so this game is primarily an adventure game. I mean, if you've played, so in terms of just like how the mechanics of it work, the singing part aside, it most reminded me of Night in the Woods. There's a ton of games that work like this, but it's sort of like a platformer light. It's got platformer style controls. It's side scrolling. There's a jump button. But mostly it's using those platformer mechanics in an adventure game kind of context. So you're mostly exploring very large spaces, usually like whole towns, and interacting with the characters there and solving problems for people, mostly by singing. So apart from the singing mechanic, which is your main interaction, exploring it is pretty familiar if you've played any platformer that has sort of adventure game leanings.
Yeah, that said, it's extremely forgiving. I mentioned that it's family friendly, and that's not just the tone and the mood and the language. It's also that it's pretty hard to mess up. Sometimes I wasn't that good at singing on the beat. Even Night in the Woods, you messed up the songs and they would tell you sucked. In this game, if you hit I haven't failed anything, and I've been pretty bad. I don't think you probably, if you don't actually participate, first of all, why are you playing this game in the first place? Like, it's a singing game, you gotta sing. But I think that if you are worried that you're not good at singing in rhythm games, you should still pick this up.
One of the things I really found cute about the singing is that, because it's something that you can basically do all the time, and it's one of your main ways of interacting with the world, there's lots of places where, something happens if you sing. But if you want to get fancy with it, you can start doing things like singing while crouching, and it sings nice and low, doesn't bring you down an octave. Or if you click the thumbstick, the singing thumbstick, and hold that down while you sing in a whisper voice, which it doesn't really do much for the game to be able to do those things, but neither does the dancing. But they all work together to make the character itself really expressive, which is really part of the fun of the game.
Oh my gosh. Every time the voice changed with your mood, if you'd had coffee recently, whether you were jumping up and down, the character feels like this bundle of energy, but not one you hate, because he can be down. Just because you're happy all the time doesn't mean you don't get overwhelmed by a vast duty that is beyond your capability. Sometimes you feel a little down and you gotta frown, but you can still kind of sadly dance, which is just amazing. Like, the fact that they bothered to make a sad version of the dance
of every dance.
Of every dance, because you can get multiple dances. One of the most charming things. And for those who haven't played, there is a dedicated dance button that you can press to dance mid-jump, mid-sing, while you're walking, while you're trying to solve puzzles. You can just start dancing. Why not?
So much of this game is about creating joy and sort of expressing this sort of sweetness. And the dance button is an obvious one, because there's no mechanical reason to have it. There's never a part in the game where you have to dance. There's not even side stories or anything that you like. I kept expecting, once I found out that there was a dance button and that there was a mechanic of sort of hunting through the game to collect additional dances, I thought, well, surely I'm going to have to use these at some point. And then I'm 6 chapters into the game and dancing up a storm while I'm attempting to save the world, and I'm like, you know what? It has never asked me to dance. I've only ever danced simply because it's cute to watch the bard dance.
Dance like nobody's watching.
Yeah, and it's so cute and so good, and it's a great example of just little bits of joy injected into this game that didn't need to be there, but just add to that whole. It's really, really sweet and cute. So we should probably talk a little bit about specifically the singing mechanic, which is the main interaction of the game. Obviously you can walk around, you can jump, you can talk to characters, which is very important. And there's a lot of dialogue in this game, a lot more than I was expecting. Never really gets tiresome, but I think the dialogue was another thing that reminded me a ton of Night in the Woods. It's presented through little character speech bubbles, short dialogue speeches, but lots of back and forth between characters. It feels very natural. So the dialogue there's a lot of it, and it's very good. But apart from talking to people, the biggest interaction you have in this game is singing. And the singing is sort of the Swiss Army knife of the game. There are literally hundreds of places in this game where you have to solve problems or minor puzzles, and every single one of them is solved by singing.
There's a lot of little light platforming segments where, your song has something, some way to impact the world. It starts off with things like you can sing a tune back to a bird, and then the bird will grab onto you so that your next jump is like a super jump, and you can use that to kind of get around through the platforming segments. Or other places where, it's important to mention that you sing by tilting the right thumbstick, and each of the, I want to say each of the 8 directions represents one note in an octave, and you've got a nice octave there, and you can dial around to any of the notes. But actually rotating that thumbstick also has, in a lot of cases, kind of rotational or directional effects that are kind of tied into your song as well. So you might be moving platforms or changing the direction of gusts of wind and things like that.
Yeah, the whole world is listening to your song and kind of responding to the notes that you're singing. And what that really means is if you hit right on the thumbstick, you might be singing a particular note. And that also means that whatever is listening to your music is going to go to the right.
And it also has a color associated with it. So even if you're totally tone deaf, you can get through this game. Although I'm sad that you will not hear the beautiful sounds. However, I was not making the most beautiful of sounds, because sometimes you just, including you sing for dialogue trees, and sometimes the options are like yay and nay, and you can only go yay.
Yeah. I really enjoyed it when there were, it would have times where you had to, give a piece of dialogue, and it wasn't sufficient just to like tilt the stick and make one note. You had to, for each word in the sentence you were saying, you had to play a different note. And so, of course, in your head, it's like, yes, let's go and get on the boat, and, it really is hilarious. The character of the bard has this quality that I think is shared by, things like Snoopy or Hello Kitty, or frankly, like emojis, where like the face is so blank as to be meaningless. And you can kind of put any feeling you want onto that face in a lot of cases, at which, later on when he does start to really express emotion, it makes that, kind of undermines that and blows it up. But it's it makes it so that when you're expressing yourself through the bard, you really feel like, you have a chance for true player expression. And that's what I guess people are really looking for in a lot of video games. People always want a way to express themselves. And even though this character ultimately, I think, has like their own characterization and stuff, it's very easy to kind of put yourself into this character. It everything from the fact that you're choosing the notes to make the fun song, to the fact that, his face is, blank and emoji-like. I think all of it works together to make this character you can really express yourself through.
Yeah, it's a game that teaches you that you're in good hands. There's so much expressiveness, so many nuances, whether it's the variations in the sound, where the sound effects. Heck, they managed to make a music game that's accessible for people who are hard of hearing or deaf. Like, I don't even know. You could just play this based on color prompts.
Yeah, you could.
And you could do it.
If you're deaf and colorblind, you might have some difficulty with certain circumstances.
Yeah, but the colors that are most commonly colorblind matching are rotated, and so they're not next to each other, and they're different. Like the dark colors are next to lighter colors. So if you are colorblind, you probably could get 90% of the information just from the directions and the tone. I just did some colorblind tests on a bunch of interfaces today, so that's the only reason why I know that.
Planning for that, though, makes the game very accessible, because like it just keeps it really easy to read and recognize what it's asking you to do, even if you have perfect color vision, because there's multiple cues. Usually there's color, there's sound, and there's some sort of shape or iconography, like a directional indicator or something. So you always have a good idea of like what they're asking you to do. Something that really surprised me about the way the music mechanic is used in this game is that I was expecting it to be more of a rhythm game. I was expecting it to play, a little bit more, Rock Band or Guitar Hero-y or something. But it never is. Very often it's using it for, we were talking about things like moving platforms around, solving puzzles, that kind of thing. But also, of course, there's like musical performances that you have to do at many points in the game. But it's never a wall and like, you failed, try again. You have to really be bad to do that. If you're even 20% of the way there, then that's good enough for the game. And it's the only sort of punishment, I guess, for not being able to perfectly play a song is just it not sounding quite as good. I always felt a little disappointed in myself when we get to this great scene with where you're playing or singing with a band or with a bunch of pirates, or there's songs that throughout the thing, and in a lot of cases you're doing these sort of performances where it sort of gives you the music game kind of thing where you can see little notes coming towards you and you have to hit them at the appropriate times. And I would screw up invariably quite a bit of that, but it never stopped me. I just sort of felt bad because it didn't sound as good as it would have if I had been playing correctly. It makes you want to get good at the music just to make beautiful music, I guess.
Yeah, it will just kind of loop back if you're really bad, but in a game about music being connective and music, harmony, if it was like, you failed the song, start over, it would really feel off color.
Yeah.
Like, it would just kind of put a bad taste in your mouth, and that is not what this game's about.
Yeah, not at all. It's just about, like, making sure that you have fun creating music, which, I mean, I'm not a musician. I don't create music for fun, but I found a lot of fun even just as you're walking around the world of this game, singing little tunes, trying to come up with the best little tunes that I could with the right analog stick. It's not super easy to do. It's kind of hard to hit some of those notes because you think you might want to, like, let's say you want to hit a note twice, you have to like move the stick to that direction and then let go and then move it again. And that's kind of hard to do. That's not how my brain works with analog sticks. And also, let's say you want to hit a note on one side of the circle and then hit a note on the other side. You want to do like a quarter circle, you want to do a Hadouken. That's just sort of how analog sticks work in my brain. But you don't really want to do that in this game because you're hitting every note in between. You want to go one direction, let go, then go another direction. That was always hard for me. So I never quite got the sound out of it that, like, I wanted to get good at playing the music of this game, and I never quite did.
There is a reason that there's no professional musical instrument that is controlled with a thumbstick.
Yeah.
I just don't think it's ideal for music. But, it does work, and it's not like the game asks much of you. It basically wants you to try.
Yeah, that's really it.
The thing I loved about, you mentioned that the game, you enjoyed just sort of singing as you walk around the world. And I think it's definitely just worth mentioning more that, like, there are so many things in the world that respond in novel and interesting ways to your song. Like, if you're walking around and there's dry leaves on the ground and you sing, the dry leaves will blow in the direction of your note. Or and there's no reason for, or things will change color to the color of your song. And there's lots of stuff like that in the world.
Or the best one is just that almost everywhere in the world, if you're singing and you hold a note, the world just sort of pulses in time with the beat of your song. So like houses and trees and animals are all kind of like bopping to the music as you play. It's subtle, but it's really cute.
Oh, my heart. It just shows that, again, it's that stuff that make me give it the label heartwarming. Not necessarily that everyone is like, you are the nicest person in the world. A lot of people are telling you you're kind of annoying for running around and singing, and I smile at that because 5 minutes later, little rainbow girl's going to pop up and call me Lil B, and that makes me incredibly happy.
One of the most unique things about this game is the color palette that it plays with across just the entire game and the artwork. I don't know if I've ever played a game that had quite this level of Lisa Frankness to its incredibly vibrant color palette. I'm just flipping through some of the screenshots that I took, and it's like... I
mean, we've had neons, but we haven't had quite ponies and unicorn colors.
We haven't had, like, Lisa Frank vaporwave, like... I don't even know what to call it, like day glow.
I don't even know if that describes it, because it's like it's just very, very good at setting, like, creating mood and setting with the color. And it's all the more noticeable because of the art style that is this sort of completely flat, predominantly unshaded, but very interestingly lit and blended color. And there's a lot of use of, like, blurred backgrounds and things like that. And I'm sure we'll talk. I know you had some issues with that, Reagan, but we may talk about that later. But there's, very, very light use of things like patterns and textures. And for the most part, everything is just huge areas of solid color, or really bold, really sharp gradients.
Yeah.
And all of the design is so, the shapes themselves are also incredibly simple in this. It has that look of something that a very creative child might make after being shown the basics of Adobe Illustrator.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, and so you get things like, when you get into a place like, that kind of shows in some places in a bit of a bad way. Like, you get into a place like the bar, the Crazy Raven, and you look at their sign, and it's like, oh my gosh, the letters here are it looks very poorly drawn. But for the most part, like, everything is these huge, simple, chunky shapes. And then when they do really invest in kind of carefully drawn, detailed stuff, it's where it really, really counts. The characters.
Yeah.
So the world itself is full of these enormous, chunky areas of, like, pure color, but the characters are very lovingly detailed. They're still in that flat style, but they have. I'm thinking of some of my favorite characters, like the accordionist. They're often very well animated. They have way more animation than you would think for this game, for the rest of the art. And they're very expressive and colorful. And they, with their animations, they'll often have a lot of, like, really cute, really great one-offs. So, like, the main character, the Bard, just when I thought I had seen all of the animation that I was going to see from the Bard in the art style there, I got into a place where I was kind of partially squished by a rising platform. And, I wasn't expecting it at all, but they had art for that situation where he was, like, straining to press the ceiling up. And
that was very cute.
And they continually surprise you with stuff like the dancing. And most of the characters that you interact with have, a whole suite of different emotions and actions that they can do. So the art really is used sparingly, but it is great where it counts, which for this game is definitely the character. So, all in all, I thought the game was artistically really successful, without feeling like they devoted an enormous art team to it.
Also, more so as it goes along. I don't want to spoil anything with the story and we may have a spoiler break at the end. I'm not really sure if we'll have that discussion or not. But if the game is divided up into these very defined act chapters. There's 7 chapters or acts in this game, and each one has a different setting. They're so distinct they almost stand alone. It's travel to the next setting, new act. And each of them is very distinct from the other in terms of art. The art style is still that sort of large, chunky shapes, but the color palette is extremely different in every place. The character designs are a little different. There are so many characters in this game, and it really makes you feel like you're getting this epic journey, this world tour, that you're seeing all these different places that are so distinct from each other.
So we've talked a lot about how the game made us feel, but let's talk a little bit more about what specifically happens. So I think this starts off with a bang. You are this little Robin Hood suited bard and you are told you want to be a hero. So, of course, what the first thing you want to do is pick up a sword, right? So you pick up this little sword and then you immediately are like, nah, that's not your thing. Little bard, you sing. And then you get the wheel. So that, to me, set the whole tone for the whole thing. You are not exactly a pacifist, but you are not trying to sword fight your way through anything. You are much more likely to solve problems by being nice to people or finding out what they need at their heart of hearts. Even at one point in the story, you deal with this guy who says he's a product of toxic masculinity.
I forgot about that guy.
Yeah, and that guy's a jerk. And you're like, yeah, you're a jerk, but maybe you just need someone to listen to you for a minute. And he's like, yeah, and everyone's like, God, that guy was a super jerk. You're like, yep, he was, but I still helped him because even if he's a jerk, I don't want to beat him up. I haven't really seen a non-combat video game quite like this in a while. Since Undertale, I think, is the big one that keeps coming to mind.
Yeah, although of course in Undertale you were making that choice, throughout the game.
Continuously, yeah.
And it's very much just sort of that's who the bard is.
It's not a player choice.
Yeah, but it still feels very natural and so right. So this game is very much oriented around this So this game is very much organized around this idea of being the counterpoint to the standard hero journey narrative. So, that first scene you were talking about, that's a dream the bard is having. That's sort of the prologue, where he picks up the sword of the hero and he can't use it, but he can sing and he can save the world through singing. And it becomes very obvious very early in the game. I forget exactly how this comes out, but everybody seems to sort of know that the world is going to end. That this world was brought into being with the song of a goddess called Ea, and there's some sort of cosmic cycle where every eon or so, the world starts to come apart, and she sings a new song, ending the old world and bringing the new world into being. And the bard wants to stop that. He wants the world to continue so that all of his friends can continue to be his friends. And he knows that that can be done by singing. And so his quest throughout the game is to collect the parts of the Earth Song, which is a song that can be sung to renew the world and sort of delay the end of the world and get Ea to give things a new lease on life. And that's sort of the overall quest that he's on, but it's constantly sort of set against the quest of the hero. In this cosmology, there is a hero whose job is, who is ordained by Ea to take this magical sword and end the world by killing all of the overseers. So the overseers are these sort of magical spirit creatures. And each chapter of the game is mostly oriented around you, the bard, trying to find the overseer in each sort of zone of the world and get from them a piece of the Earth Song so that you can sing it and renew the world. But you're sort of in competition with the hero, who's very traditional video game hero style, billowing cloak and all, or scarf, and massive sword. And they're trying to basically stop you and oppose your nice version of the world. Their hero's journey is different than yours, and there's so much more to this story than I was expecting. I really did not expect the story of this game to be so involving and interesting. It goes places you don't expect. I will not spoil them here, but even at the very end of the game, I was constantly being surprised by choices the characters were making and turns that the story was taking. There's a really big sort of gear shift about midway through the game that just totally surprised me. This game did not look like a story-heavy game. It looked like this sort of story-light, fun, beautiful music experience. But the biggest surprise of this game for me was that the story was what kept me going through the whole thing. I was interested in the story to the very end of the game.
I was really happy that, although the tone shifts and the mood changes, that it still felt like the same game.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't seen a lot of games pull off such radical shifts without feeling like different games. And I think the mechanics radically change, and I think what you're doing radically changes, but it's still, I think the main character is strong enough that the game still feels like Wandersong.
Yeah, it reminded me a lot of, I mean, this is probably just showing my personal fandoms, but it reminded me a lot of cartoons that I like Adventure Time and Steven Universe, where they're cartoons in that they have, they're for kids. They are, E for everyone rated, or whatever they use for TV, I forget. And but they still have depth to them. They still go occasionally into dark places. They still have, characters that have development and backstory, even while they're staying sweet and kid-friendly and, having this sort of positivity that never really goes away. They never really go to those incredibly dark places, even if they're dealing with dark themes. That's what this feels like. This game goes places. The story goes places. But the
Degrassi, it goes there.
Yeah, but it's like Degrassi, this could air on children's television. Like this is this could be a kid. What?
I was like, have you ever seen Degrassi? Because it is not children's television.
It's like YA, right? Like I have seen Degrassi.
Steven Universe is a much better comparison. I just wanted to make the joke.
I don't think the developer specifically called out Steven Universe, but he did specifically compare it on a couple of interviews. Said that his big story inspirations were Earthbound and Over the Garden Wall and My Neighbor Totoro. And I specifically see Earthbound and Over the Garden Wall in this. Like, absolutely. Earthbound, this has that. Earthbound is about kids going on a surreal sort of road trip. It's a bit episodic too, exploring this world and meeting weird characters. And this has a lot of that vibe, that sort of like exploring a massive, weird, sort of surreal world full of these like over-the-top characters, but all of whom have like a little spark of actual heart to them. And then Over the Garden Wall, just the weirdness of that. Like
Over the Garden Wall had that unexpectedness. But a really sweet core relationship in it. This one doesn't have quite all the spooky menace of Over the Garden Wall.
It does occasionally.
Really high stakes.
Yeah. Over the Garden Wall is something I've come back to several times. I think another thing worth mentioning is that it has music in common. Over the Garden Wall is a musical show as well.
I will probably own the vinyls for both.
When I first started playing this game, I initially thought like, wow, this would make a great kids game. This would be great for like maybe like a young kid who, you'd have to be able to read, but just barely, and then this would be like on their level. And then the farther I got into the game, the more I thought like, well, maybe not. It gets kind of heavy. But then I thought, well, no, like things like Steven Universe and Over the Garden Wall, like it gets kind of heavy, but it does it in a way that I think could bring a kid along for the ride. It never got to the point where I was like, I wouldn't show that to a child. It's just it finds its way to give you something to chew on with the story or the characters without kind of going to places that I don't think would feel right for something with this incredibly adorable bard as the main character.
People drink coffee instead of booze.
Yeah, hey, that's another Earthbound thing, man. That they had, when they localized it, they had to turn all the bars into cafes or whatever.
So one of the selling points in the Kickstarter is literally that there are 150 characters in this game, and I believe it.
Yeah, easily. 150
plus. They said that the little bit of charm, it's got that Night of the Woods flavor, that kind of wander around a town, talk to everybody. I exhausted dialogue trees because I like getting yelled at by grandmas and finding out why that girl didn't have a boyfriend, even though she could eat 20 hot dogs in an hour.
There's so much dialogue, even from these like random characters, and it's always so interesting. They all have little backstories, or they all have something unique to say, and there were so many characters that like really stand out. I say that, and I'm going to reference a character whose name I can't remember, but like the character that when you're in the town in the second act and you put that band together, and you have to sort of in very typical video game fashion, if you want to get these people to join your band, you have to sort of do something for them. And one of those characters is a accordion player whose mother is recently deceased and was a famous accordion player herself. And he doesn't feel like he can perform, in front of people because he's sort of in her shadow or whatever. And
I thought that was a female character. But
the pink hair,
the accordionist.
Yeah, that's a boy. I'm pretty confident he
The
said
accordion
so.
player?
Yeah.
I thought it was a daughter.
Well, I mean, it doesn't really matter, but I'm pretty confident he said he was a guy at one point.
Do you want to look this up before?
Nope, don't care. So anyway, the
Well,
accordion
you don't care
player.
because you're sure you're right.
Doesn't matter. You're right.
It doesn't matter.
Gender is a social construct.
I don't know where we
That's
would look it
okay.
up anywhere. I don't think there's a fan wiki for this yet.
Yeah, most people in reviews are like, sad girl.
Oh, they say girl?
Helping the girl with the accordion. I don't know what her name is.
I swear it's a guy, but I may be very wrong. Anyway, the accordionist, who shall remain gender neutral. That was like the most moving thing in the game for me. Well, that's not true. It gets really moving towards the end as well. But like, it's really strong sort of side quest because weird stuff. You speak to ghosts. One of your bard powers is that you unlock the power to talk to ghosts, which comes in handy throughout the entire game. There's constantly ghosts and spirits that you can talk to, and in order to bring the accordionist along with you to play in your band, you introduce him to his mother's ghost, and they have a kind of an accordion jam session that you are kind of intermediating. They play some. They can't hear each other, so you play both parts and kind of bring this guy or woman, I don't know, together with his or her mother. It's so beautiful. Like, that scene was so touching, and then that character was like there with you through a lot of the game, kept coming back, and every character in the game has a little bit of something like that. Maybe they don't have a fully fleshed out sort of side story like that, but every one of them has something to say that tells you a little bit about who they are, and it's always really interesting and sometimes moving and sometimes funny. I thought every character in this was sort of unique, and I don't know what to compare it to for that, but it's got like a really large cast of like really strong side and background characters.
Yeah, speaking of favorite characters and little things, I mean, there are so many tiny moments, like even naming your bard is a little wheel where you spin around and point to different letters.
That
and
was super
it's
cute.
kind of letter locked, so you can't put your own name in. I mean, I ended up naming my bard Greg because I thought that was fun. And I started off with G, and I was like, oh, you're limited to 8 characters each time.
4, I think. Oh, no, you mean
4,
it lets you choose
8.
from 8. Yes, that's right.
You choose
Sorry.
from 8 characters, and then the length has to be 4 characters. But I redid my name many times because I was not satisfied with what I ended up with. And when I finally chose my name, they made fun of me. They're like, man, who doesn't even know their own name?
Let me try again. Wait.
Yeah, I screenshotted that because it made me laugh. I said, you took a really long time spelling your own name, but okay.
But okay, we totally believe you're smart enough to save the world.
Yeah, that was great.
Oh, and I also was incredibly charmed that a number of characters tell bad puns, and every time there's this pause and a little slide whistle. Doo!
Yeah, one thing I thought was great about it is they find a way to mix all these characters that are at once like very familiar but also out of place. Like, you have it kind of has to do with the fact that it's jumping between these different settings that are all like almost schizophrenically different. Like, you go straight from a modern American style small town to a pirate ship. But all of the characters are tropes in one way or another. So you have, probably 5 seconds walk from each other. There's the teenager who is telling you things like, hang on, I have screenshotted this.
Yeah, I was
This
going to say, please read the teenager. She made me so happy.
Yeah, so the teen was saying things like, I just don't have the spirit to be a proper teen. And had a few other quotes. I wish I'd gotten more of those. And there was another teenager that you see later that was just like a real jerk. he just is way too cool for you, and he just asks you to move off and don't sing near him and stuff. But once you've done your musical performance, he tells you that he realized that being uncool is just another way to be cool.
And he also says, "I'm fanboying for you so hard right now," and
Yes.
he has Bieber hair, and it's fantastic.
Aww, what a cutie.
So these characters are they're very tropey, but they're also very well done. And, it's such a mix of different tropey characters. To have that alongside like magical fairies and stuff like that. So it never does one of them stick around so long that they wear out their welcome.
So the developer, Greg, I didn't realize I was naming the character after the developer, but now I get to feel like I was very smart to do so. He said that the game, when he created it, if he had made a game that was always positive, it would be a very empty experience. And I think that it's a testament to him thinking that through, that he managed to create something that's got so much positivity and optimism in it, but it's not as shallow as we all kind of expected.
Yeah.
I loved it for that reason. Again, I was really down and I was looking for escapism. I wasn't expecting for something to empathize with where I was. I was feeling kind of helpless, and the game basically kept saying, like, it's bravery and courage is doing your best and staying hopeful when all is lost and you can't really do anything.
And you can, you can go on a quest to save the world with your songs, and it won't always work. And there's going to be just absolute heartbreaks along the way, but it's about staying positive through that.
We all know it's a dumb idea to try to save the world through song, because who actually think that's going to work?
Yeah, but it's, that's what this game is all about, is like facing impossible odds and staying positive and staying true to yourself and staying about, like, not going down the easy path. And it's so...
And dance buttons.
And a dance button. Always dancing. Always dancing. How many dances did you collect?
I have 3 dances right now.
I know
more.
There's at least one dance in each act, and I couldn't find most of them. I think I only got 4 dances. So
I actually think I got 4 dances. I know I had the one where you're like doing the little shuffle. You're like,
that is the starter dance is easily my favorite.
I found there was a hula that was hidden.
Oh, I didn't get that one.
If you're in the boat, there's an island that's like almost completely hidden under because the map, when you pull out the map, you can see a pair of hands holding it, and there's an island hidden under one of the thumbs.
Ha! That's great.
So there's a hula you can get there. There's a delightful pirouette, and then there's one that's kind of a walk like an Egyptian style dance.
I got that one. I think I didn't get the pirouette though.
Arms.
My favorite, so I got one that was kind of like the bard was trying to like, it's like he's voguing but extremely badly. So he's just sort of like walking around, sort of noodle arming in front of his face. It's so funny looking. They're also good.
The pirouette was super good. Some of the dances, like, there's no run button in this game, and you move at a pretty good clip, so it's not that bad. But I wasn't moving any faster, but psychologically, if I was pirouetting the whole time, it felt like I was going faster.
I totally get that. I did the exact same thing with the voguing. It was just like, go for it, little bard, go for it.
Yeah, the fact that the dance move works in every single other sprite meant that there was a lot of times when I'd be doing something very dangerous and I would just be noodle arming my way across. Why not?
Why not? So good. So this game is out on PC, I think also Mac, and on Steam, and on Nintendo Switch. So right now, console exclusive to the Switch. I think Switch is a good platform for it. It's actually kind of interesting to see that this is out when it is, because this is a Game Maker game, a Game Maker studio, and they only started supporting Switch in like May or something, like pretty recently. So it's I don't think it's the first Game Maker game on Switch, but it's certainly sort of a first wave. I think that might account for some of the visual glitches that I was running into. this game has it tries to do depth by blurring layers. And so a lot of the times things will be sort of in the background or in the foreground, and it will use blurring on different layers of the environment to try and create depth of field or whatever you want to call it. And in this case, its way of doing that didn't look very good, at least not on my TV. It looked kind of like, rather than blurring, sometimes it looked sort of like a dithery, pixelated kind of effect instead of a blur, or rather, in addition to a blur. It just sort of didn't look like a very good blur. And I know that's not like a horsepower thing on the Switch. The Switch is powerful enough to blur layers, you know? I'm pretty sure. I've seen other games do it pretty well. But I think it might be... At first I thought, like, wait, this seems broken. That isn't supposed to look like that. Textures popping in and out instantaneously, and blur effects looking like really weird. That sort of disappeared for me after I got really engaged in the game, so I wouldn't let that hold you off. But if you're really sensitive to that sort of thing and want to play on a large high-resolution screen, you might prefer the PC version, because I'm pretty sure that version looks a little better in terms of like blur effects and things like that.
Yeah, and for the record, I don't think Shane and I experienced that on our TVs, but we don't have fancy TVs like Reagan.
I am pre-4K. I'm not into the extreme. I'm not an extreme gamer.
I kind of wonder about that, because it was extremely noticeable for me, and I'm not, you know, my TV's not that fancy. Were you guys playing on the Switch screen, like on the handheld, or were you?
No.
Huh. Okay.
No. Yeah. Well, I did some, but I mostly played docked on my big, beautiful 1080p TV.
I would almost imagine that I was encountering a bug in some of those cases. It was extremely noticeable and sort of distracting.
I didn't make it as far in the game as either of the two of you, but I definitely encountered a couple of really noticeable bugs, one of which was pretty concerning because it seemed like I was stuck. I had to reboot the game a few times to get out of it. So yeah, it's not a game that's 100% free of bugs. Nothing was a showstopper, but it is worth noting that I think they anticipate the possibility that you might run into a bug that blocks your progress, because there was some elements in their FAQ about how to quit out of the game by essentially like clearing your save and then putting in a cheat code that unlocks a level select to get back to where you were. So yeah, it's not a game where I would say go in expecting a bug-free experience. Although, you know, nothing really happened that bad.
Yeah, I got one bug that wasn't a showstopper, but was a little bit annoying in the big concert scene at the, I forget what it's called, like the Black Raven or whatever, where the band has finally gotten together and you play the big concert. I was about halfway through the song, and it sort of locked up with just like an endless note, and so the band kept playing in the background. And I was just like, oh, for a few minutes. And then the band finished. And then I was still just standing there singing, oh, in a totally quiet room. And I had to quit out of the game and restart. And it picked right up at the beginning of the of that scene. And it was fine. Something actually interesting about the saving in this game is it saves constantly. Like it saves. Like if you talk to a character multiple times, let's say most characters will have like 3 or 4 different dialogue things that they can say. You talk to somebody once, it saves that you've talked to them once. You talk to them again, it saves that you talked to them again. You can tell because it shows the little auto-saving icon. And if you quit out of the game, you pick up usually exactly where you left off, even in terms of things like dialogue, which I thought was a good thing, but also kind of scary when I ran into that bug and I was like, it probably just saved. I'm just going to load up here and I'm just going to still be singing. But altogether, bugs or no, this was a phenomenal game. I'm so glad that we played it. I'll be honest, Laura, like the trailer did not 100% sell me on this. I thought it was cute, but I'm so glad that you pushed to play this and that you told us to, because I probably would have skipped over this, or maybe thought like, oh, I'll get around to that and not played it immediately as we did. But like this game was lovely. I don't know if this will be in like my, games of 2018, like game of the year list or anything. It might be, but I'm not sure. It's been a pretty interesting year, but it's definitely up there. Like, this was much more interesting and fun and sweet. It's so much better than I thought it was going to be.
We were stuck for a game for a little bit there, and I don't often pick the games for the show, but coming into this one, I was like, hey, this looks good. It's free on PS Plus. It's Cube Director's Cut.
Yeah.
And we kind of bounced off of that one. So, like, I'm really glad we had this to come to. A Cube Director's Cut. No shame on your endless block puzzles, but yeah, it's not. Sure, I'm sure the game is short, but it's not the kind of thing that I'm really wanting to get that deep into. Frankly, I got farther into it than I thought I would. Once I realized, like, oh boy, these block puzzles are just getting bigger.
You mentioned that it's, we were a little hurting. You mentioned that we were kind of hurting for a game in some ways. There were a couple releases that came out late. We were all pretty busy. I was open to the game and got to play it, and I was really happy it came along. And, you mentioned it might not be on your end of the year game list. For me, it's definitely one of my gaming moments of 2018 because it was a game that really did pick up my mood and strengthen me. I don't normally, I can intellectually feel very moved by Celeste, but I haven't had that kind of mental illness, and so I'm really glad it's there and it was empathetic, but it wasn't immediately selfishly linking to what I needed at the moment, and this was. So I was not feeling very optimistic, and I needed someone being it optimistic to be like, being happy is not being stupid, and I needed to hear that.
I totally agree. Like, this game, I'm not going to be hyperbolic and say like this is a cure for 2018, but it definitely feels like something like an experience that I needed to have with the frustrations that we've all been going through in the last 2-ish years. It felt like, it's a game with a positive worldview, and that's, belief in changing things by being good, and
it's change that doesn't just come from anger. Yeah. And I think I needed to hear that anger is valuable, but also hope is too. Yeah,
it's so hopeful. It's really what it's about. So this game, we mentioned it's out on Nintendo Switch. It's $20, which I think is a great deal. This is a 10 to 12 hour game. I stayed up late into the night playing this game because I wanted to finish it. It will keep you engaged throughout that 10 hours. I know that's sort of on the long side for the short game, but it's a short for the gaming landscape as a whole. And this is play this game. It's great. It's $20. It's on PC. It's on the Switch. Just go out and get it. And listeners will probably be familiar with our segment, What's Making You Happy This Week? Laura, what's making you happy this week?
So I had a work trip to London, and although I didn't get any time to myself during the week, on Saturday I ran to the Victoria and Albert Museum to see the Design, Play, Disrupt video game exhibit.
I'm so jealous.
Yeah, if you're anywhere near London and you are interested in video games, it is a wonderful exhibit. I had missed out since I was joining my team late. They all went to see it for free as a group, and people had kind of tried to minimize my expectations, saying, well, you're already into video games, so you've probably seen all of the stuff on the internet already. Like, you're probably going to be, just hearing stuff you've already heard before. And yeah, if you've been really listening to video games, there's a lot there, but they really did a good job of getting special things. It would be like saying, if you're a big Harry Potter fan, like, why would you go to Hogsmeade at Warner Brothers? Like, because there's new stuff there. And for me, you walk through the door, it's this beautiful design museum. The rest of the afternoon I spent there was equally incredible. They have Kylie Minogue's dressing room reproduced. Why? They have Beatrix Potter drawings. Like, why are those things next to each other? I don't know. But you walk into the video game exhibit and you're greeted by an enormous screen playing Journey. And it was like every single person who walked in just stopped and their jaws dropped and they kind of went, oh. Like they literally just went out like, video games is art. You're going to watch beautiful, clips from Journey with the soundtrack playing and you're going to figure it out. And then you turn to the right and there's a giant wall of their spreadsheet where they planned it. And I loved that there were so many people in front of that giant TV screen, and then there were all the nerds clustered around the spreadsheet, taking pictures, taking notes. Like, we were all just like, give me these drawing notebooks, give me the project.
Normies want to watch the art from the game, but you and me, we want to look at the spreadsheet from when they planned it.
Hey, and I posted the spreadsheet to our podcast chat, and everybody was like, yes, I will. Like, what? The spreadsheet?
That was really fascinating to see a spreadsheet about...
Enhance.
Yeah, about the creation of Journey. Like, really, really interesting. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, we'll post it. And, I mean, they also had an entire wall the size of one of the walls of my apartment that were just small screens showing different worlds from No Man's Sky. They had a wall full of merch that was reproductions of the clothes from Splatoon and Splatoon 2.
I would have loved that.
Yeah, and what really made me happiest was just the resources that a design museum like that can bring to doing video games, because they can do huge walls. Yes, they can do TV screens, but in Kentucky Route Zero, they're like, oh, you were inspired by a Magritte painting? Cool, we got that down the street. We'll borrow it and put it next to the Kentucky Route Zero screen. It was inspired. So it had the actual Magritte painting.
That's insane.
You go from that into a room full of arcade games, into a full wall where they have videos on things like building stuff in Minecraft and cosplay based on Overwatch. These kind of big conversations. A few people have said that were non-game folks that they wished that the questions of video games, like why are video games so white, or are video games sexist, the ones that the game community talks so much about, were only given one big room about like conversations around gaming. But to me, that was almost refreshing because they acknowledged it existed. They had a ton of talking heads describing their feelings. A lot of people we've talked about on the podcast, like Nina Freeman, like little video capture of her on a wall talking about, designing for inclusivity. But it was much more about the celebration than the conversations that have taken over. They didn't push it under the rug, but you go straight from the kind of problems and conversations into gaming into weird experimental games. And it doesn't feel like Whiplash. So if you have a chance to go, all of the young docents at Victoria Albert are on that program. You go elsewhere in the building and all the docents are like 50 plus. And in this one, it's all the like 24-year-old interns who are there because they know how to troubleshoot the games. So talk to the docents even just try to look at some clips online if you can't go in person. Definitely worth... The museum itself is free. The exhibit is ticketed, and it's like £18, which is like $23, $25, depending on when you go. Completely worth it. I was a little worried. I spent 2.5 hours there, so...
That's incredible. I really, really wish I could make it. That sounds amazing. I wish there were more exhibitions like that around. I feel like there's, that probably isn't, as museum exhibitions go, isn't that expensive a thing to put on, and I think they would... I don't know.
And a lot of people apparently in the game industry are traveling. There's a lot of events happening.
And another important part of that, I think, is that, like, it's good for museums to be involved in this stuff, because something like that spreadsheet from the creators of Journey, sometimes this stuff is literally on paper, and it belongs, and it's in a box in the garage of a game designer someplace. And I'm not sure what Victoria and Albert's role is in terms of preserving that material, but it's certainly good for it to be acknowledged as like important from a design and art perspective, and and get into some sort of conservation process. Like, don't throw those game design docs out or let them get moldy in a garage somewhere. Give them to a museum or similar thing and let them preserve them and occasionally use them in an exhibition or something.
Yeah, I mean, they have a wall from the developers planning in Last of Us that's just the timeline with all the Post-its and things reproduced.
Wow.
They've got They collected a lot of sketches from Bloodborne. So it's not just indie games. They even did a tiny game about a woman who made little prototype iPhone games to talk about her relationship with food. Things that you never would have played before, but they thought were noteworthy. So all scales, it's not common to me that, even something celebratory, it being a museum, it wanted to hit all levels. Emily Short has a great write-up of the exhibit as well that I read afterwards,
Awesome.
where she talked about why it was important to her.
Well, let's try to have a link to that in the show notes.
Yep.
So my thing that's making me happy this week is much less sort of high culture and is much more low internet culture. But I finally picked up the Drill book. If you're on Twitter, you probably know who Drill, aka Wint, is. And you probably think he's weird and disgusting and interesting in the same ways that I do. But I have been following him on Twitter I looked at my Twitter account recently and realized I have been on Twitter for, it will be 10 years in a month. And that's horrifying. You'd think like you bought a book that's literally 10 years worth of Twitter posts just printed out. And yes, that's exactly what I did. And I'm so glad I bought this because it's so interesting to just sort of flip through, because rather than reading Drill's Twitter posts, one at a time as they come out over the course of 10 years, here you can read 1,500 posts categorized by topics. Fantastic topics such as animals, ass, barbecue, beauty and fashion, beer, birds, brands, cars, charity and activism, crime and punishment, death, deep state, diaper, dick, Digimon Otis, etc. That's just through the D's. And it's actually more amusing to read them in book form somehow, collected in this way. And I've got a bunch of sticky tabs, the little like tabs that you would use when you're in school and want to mark your places in your notes.
You're physically faving.
Oh, I totally am. I'm going through and adding sticky faves to all of my favorite Drill tweets, and it's been an extremely fun experience. So I wish I've only had this book a few days, so I can't go through and tell you all of the best Drill tweets, but I will read my favorite from the section on animals. I am selling 6 beautiful, extremely ill white horses. They no longer recognize me as their father and are the burden of my life. Thank you, Drill. Thank you for 10 years of great posts. The book is called Drill Official Mr. 10 Years Anniversary Collection. It's on Amazon. It's about $12. You should absolutely pick it up. And it's making me very happy this week.
Looking back through some of my past Drill faves, you gotta love this one. Lover unbuttons my pants and sees the ankh looped around my cock. She looks up at me, but it's too late. I'm already hollering about the Anubis.
Jesus Christ. I literally every single page of this book, there has been something that made me say, oh God, and then put the book down for a minute. So good. Thank you, Drill, for 10 years of great posts. I literally think Drill is one of the most interesting writer voices of our generation. And that makes me sad to say, but it also makes me proud. I love Drill, even if he's awful.
Because he's awful.
Indeed, exactly.
This whole thing smacks of gender, I holler, as I overturn my uncle's barbecue grill and turn the 4th of July into the 4th of shit.
Oh my God. If you have a favorite Drill tweet, friends, send it to me. Let me know what your favorite Drill tweet is. Shane, what's making you happy this week?
Well, I kind of have 2 things. I have one that's more or less video game related and one that's a little more personal. I'll start with the personal. It's that my little baby has got so many words now. He's just barely 1, so he's like, what is he? How many months old is that little dude? He's like 14 months now, and that little guy, he can say up and down and dog and mama and dada and ball and hat and water and bye and bubble and pop and duck, and he does all kinds of gestures like pointing and shaking and he'll give you high fives if you ask him for a high five. He'll give you a hug if you ask him for a hug. He has a special gesture for more and for all done. That's thanks to his mama's careful tutelage. And most precious of all, if you tell him to dance or wiggle, he will dance and wiggle.
He's just like the bard.
Yes, indeed. And it was actually funny today because I asked him how was his day, and the name of his daycare has wiggle in it, and so I asked him how his day was at the wiggle room, and he started to wiggle. Yeah, it was very, very cute. So yeah, that's the thing that's really making me happy this week. And it's good that that's making me happy because the video game thing that's making me happy this week is more or less a long-standing ambivalent relationship that I have with a game. I continue to be a long-term casual Destiny player. And the new Destiny came out a little while ago, and I said, very casual with it. I have still not finished the campaign of Forsaken, but it's very, very good. It is very, very, very good. And it has added a new mode that has sucked up all of my... I typically get to play Destiny once the baby is asleep, or really play anything. That includes games for the show. So I play a little bit of Destiny when I am too tired to do anything else, which means I'm not great at it. But this new mode, which is called Gambit. Have you guys heard of Gambit?
I read an article about it. It sounded really interesting.
Yeah, it's really neat.
What is
it? Destiny has always been a game that has two kind of conflicting play styles, PvE and PvP. And some people are really into the PvE. Some people are really into the PvP. I've had phases where I was really into both. This new Gambit is a mix of both, where you have two teams that are facing off both in arenas against your typical Destiny enemies, and that come at you in waves, so it's kind of a horde mode. And as you kill off these enemies, you are collecting motes that you fill up a bank with. And when you fill the bank, you summon a primeval, which is like a big boss, and then you kill that boss, and the first group to kill their boss wins. But what complicates it, and what makes it, I think, particularly fun and interesting, is that as you're doing this, every so often a portal opens that lets you go across to the enemy's side, and either kill them and steal their motes, or kill them, which heals the big boss enemy that they're fighting. And so there are... It is kind of ripe for these kind of fun Destiny moments where, you're single-handedly slaying tons of, space monsters, which, they've got even more great space monsters than ever before. And simultaneously, you have this opportunity to have this PvP experience, either defending yourself and your team from an invader, or invading yourself and, getting the drop on the enemy and maybe changing the course of the game. So it's honestly super fun. Destiny has always been a game where just jumping around and shooting space guys in different space places has always looked great and felt great, and the guns are fun. And certain times that is exactly what I want to be doing with my time, usually in the neighborhood of like midnight to 1 a.m. That's when I want to be, what I want to be doing with my time. And so, yeah, this has turned out to be a really good iteration of Destiny. I will finish this campaign. I will avenge the death of Cade 6 and
poor Cade.
Sad times, guys. If you are interested in Destiny, I should say, like right now, Destiny itself, the Destiny 2 main game was free on PS Plus, and if you also have PS Plus, the first two expansions to it are both on sale for something like, for pretty cheap right now. So it's never been a cheaper time to get on board with Destiny, but I think it seems as though that things are kind of starting to wind down. I don't know that they have big expansions planned after this.
At this point, I kind of
for Destiny
wonder
2.
if you aren't already playing Destiny, then you're probably not in the market.
I don't know. I would maybe. Well, that might be true. There's still a ton of great content there. There are a lot of people that play Destiny single player exclusively.
That's true.
And there's a lot of really, really good single player content in Destiny 2 for you to get through. And at the price that it's at right now, I think is a pretty decent value. And the online multiplayer is really good, and collecting guns is fun. And I don't think that anything about that changes for anybody. So,
That's true. Yeah,
not the worst time to
and
get
if
on board.
it's if the base game is free, that's true. Give it a try. I had a lot of fun hours with it. I eventually gave it up, but I think it's definitely a compelling shooter package thing if that's what you're into. And occasionally I am. This was a great game to play. Thank you guys for joining me on this episode. And Laura, thank you again for giving me the push that I needed to play this, because I might have otherwise skipped it. So I'm really glad that we talked about I was about to call it Wandersong, but that's a different thing. That's a
different thing. It also sounds pretty gnarly. So.
Yeah. Well, anyway, this game was great. And our next episode is also probably going to be pretty great, because we're jumping back into our coverage of IF Comp. IF Comp rolls around once a year. If you haven't listened to any of our previous coverage of IF Comp or not familiar, the very quick version is that IF Comp is a yearly competition for interactive fiction games. Interactive fiction being text adventure games and choose your own adventure style games, games that are primarily text-driven storytelling games, usually sometimes with puzzle elements. If you aren't familiar with those sorts of games, IF Comp is a great way to check them out. We usually do more than one episode on IF Comp because there are many, many games included. This year there are 77 entries, which is a lot. So we won't be covering every single one, but we'll do our best to try and find the most interesting games in this year's IF Comp and talk a little bit about them. If you are following IF Comp, and you find something you think is interesting, let us know. We always need help identifying, out of that big batch of 77 games, what's most interesting, most worth our time, what's interesting that we should check out and talk about on the show. So if you are following IF Comp, if you're not, you probably should be. And if you are, let us know what you think is interesting, and we'll try to make sure we talk about it on the show. That'll probably be our next 2 episodes. The other thing I wanted to mention, since this is on the horizon game or episode, is that we are also planning an episode on arcade games on the Switch. I'm a big collector of arcade game compilations. It's just a thing that I like. And I've always sort of enjoyed picking up arcade games on newer hardware. So I have a big collection of PS2 arcade game collections, and I'm starting to do that with the Switch as well. The Switch has become a really great destination for ports of arcade games. There's some really interesting stuff popping up on there. So if you have an arcade game that's out on the Switch that you particularly love, maybe you have a history with the game itself on original arcade stuff, or maybe you found it more recently and you think it's fun and worth picking up, let us know. Any game that you are into that has formerly appeared on an arcade cabinet, but now has a release on the Switch, whether it's an individual release or part of a compilation, let us know and we'll talk about it on our episode. So all of that aside, thank you for joining us on this episode of The Short Game. You can find our show on Twitter @_shortgame, or you can find our website at www.theshortgame.net, where we've got a contact form. That's a good way to let us know about all the stuff I was just talking about. Either of those. Twitter is good too. And I'm Reagan Kelly, and you can find me on the internet @ReaganK on Twitter. Laura, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter @LauraJNash.
And Shane, where can people find you?
On Twitter @8BitShane.
And thank you so much for joining us on this episode of The Short Game.